Great. It is noon, so we're going to get started. Hi, my name is Anne, and I am an employment counselor here at Interfaith Outreach. I just want to remind everyone to, if you're not already, put on your mute. If you have any questions, please feel free to add them to the chat. We'll be monitoring that as we go. And we also think it's important to note the context in which we're gathering today. Dante Wright was a 20-year-old Black man who was killed by the police on Sunday in Brooklyn Center. Although specifics surrounding the shooting are still under investigation, the result is the same, another Black man killed by the police. We at Interfaith extend our sincere condolences to Dante's family. Our community is experiencing re-traumatization. At Interfaith, our mission is to respond to emergency needs, and for many, this is an emergency. As our values state, everyone in our community counts. Everyone has an irreplaceable role to play. So thank you again for being with us here today. And with that, I'll pass it over to Kevin Ward to start us off with today's gathering.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kevin Ward, and I am the Executive Director of Interfaith. And on behalf of Interfaith, we'd like to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and spend some time with us at our event called Building the Network. Building the Network. And for some of you who may not be familiar with Interfaith, we've been around for more than 40 years. And the work that we've done has compounded not only in the community, but in the lives of those that we've touched. And we started with a mission, and our mission was very, very simple, and that's to engage the heart and will of the community to respond to the emergency need and create opportunities for all to thrive. That's the mission of Interfaith. That's what we get up every day and work towards. One is to respond to that emergency need, and secondly is to build opportunity for all to thrive. And I often say that we could have easily stopped when LaDonna got together with that founding group. They could have easily stopped that engage the heart and will of the community to respond to the emergency need and just put a period right there. But they had the audacity to want to create opportunities for all to thrive. And I think that's why we're here today, is to talk about how we can help create that opportunities for those who may be seeking and want gainful employment. The vision is to build a vibrant community where everyone counts in all sectors and systems. All sectors and systems work together for the good. All sectors and systems work together for the good. Our 6 impact areas, this is how we're able to live that out. We have 6 impact areas, and they include transportation, housing, employment services, education, food, and family services. And I'll give you a little cheat sheet. One of the ways to remember that is I made up a word called thief. Is THEEFF. And that's how I'm able to remember our impact areas. But the one in particular is the employment services. You know, poverty is one of those things that can impact all of us in different ways. And I personally know what it feels like to live in that poverty, or to have someone who is underemployed, where they don't have enough money or resources to meet the basic needs of the family. But I think the importance of coming together as a community is so that we can make those 6 systems in those sectors work together. And as employers and as people who are connected, what we're really here to do is to make the network work for all people. We want the network to work. Did you know that we are in the midst of our Prevent Hunger campaign? And there's one thing that directly impacts hunger. There's one thing, there's a lot of things, but there's one thing in particular, and I want to kind of make this interactive. Can anyone tell me what's that one thing that can directly impact hunger in the lives of families? Does anybody know? Or is everybody on mute? Can they shout it out? Can they not? Okay.
Shout it out.
You can come off mute and shout it out.
Employment.
Employment. Absolutely. That's one thing that directly impacts the quality of someone's life. It impacts their ability to provide food for their family, shelter, having those necessary resources. And one of our values here at Interfaith is a community partnership provides powerful and life-changing opportunities. We can do our work by helping to meet that emergency need and responding each and every time. This community comes together and gives to us to allow us to do that. But we also are very serious about creating opportunities for everyone in this community to thrive. And they're thriving. We don't have to come up with what that necessarily looks like, because it looks different for each and every family. But if you think about Maslow's hierarchy of need, right? And that basic foundation being food, water, and shelter. And then when you get to the top of that pyramid, it's all about actualization, being able to function past your basic needs. Gainful employment is one way that can lift a family out of poverty. It can restore self-esteem within the mom and dad who are working. It could impact generations of having income and building wealth. It can also meet the basic everyday needs of survival. And so that's why we've brought you here as potential partners and as a community to help you understand the opportunities that we have. And we're gonna go through some statistics. We're gonna set the stage so you can see just where the opportunities are and just how unemployment has impacted our community. But we also wanna challenge you as our network to help us make it work. But not just for us, for all people. Systems and sectors working together for all people. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Ann.
Thank you, Kevin. And now we'd like to hand it over to Tim O'Neill, Regional Labor Market Analyst from DEED, the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development. Tim is DEED's Labor Market Analyst for the 7-county Twin Cities region of Minnesota. He focuses on labor force and industry trends, regional demographics, hiring demand, and educational outcomes. He has a bachelor's degree in history and political science from St. Olaf College in Northfield and a master's degree in public policy from the Humphrey School of Public Affairs at the University of Minnesota. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you, Ann. And thank you, Kevin, for setting the stage here too with, looking at how jobs and employment can really impact the lives of, all Minnesotans. That's kind of one of the biggest goals actually of the Labor Market Information Office where I work. We're a pretty small office, and I'm going to be honest, you're going to see a lot of statistics, figures, charts, graphs, tables, all that kind of stuff. I work with a lot of data, and you can reach out to our office for that type of data, whether it's, Liz, if you go to the next screen, whether it's unemployment, employment, wages and salaries, projections, you can see all that with the middle bullet point. And we work with the Bureau of Labor Statistics. You see that in the top bullet point. But all of that is kind of going back to, what Kevin was saying for the final bullet point that you see on this slide, making better, more informed decisions. And so that can be for job seekers, it can be for students, it can be for graduates, it can be for workforce development boards, city councils, anyone that's just generally curious about the labor market. But I think, yes, the target here today is looking at how can we have those connections between job seekers and employers across the state, within Hennepin County, within the communities that Interfaith Outreach is working with. And so I think that's hopefully the goal of, looking at some of the data here today and how it can help out. I've set a timer. Actually, I just set it. Sometimes with labor market information, I can get a little long-winded, so I apologize if I get too far into the weeds here today. But if anything, sparks your curiosity, if you want to learn more, I think another big takeaway of my portion here today is that you can reach out to me anytime, and I'll help you out with the statistics, kind of looking at the context. If you just have a quick question, or if you want a more in-depth report or another presentation, definitely feel free to reach out to me or others within the Labor Market Information Office. And we'll have the contact information at the very end here. So here, getting into how's the job market doing. Basically, I'm going to give an overview on, how has COVID-19 impacted Minnesota, with a special emphasis on Hennepin County. Which industries have been hit the hardest? Which ones have been more resilient to the impacts of COVID-19? How have jobs come back? And then also looking at labor force, and then, what can be some opportunities for growth going forward? From all this data, what's it telling us? What can we do? So hopefully that can be another takeaway as well. But if we go to the next slide, this is the first chart that you'll see, so get excited about all this data coming forward. But this is basically telling us, the black line that you see on this chart is showing the current situation. This is like the 30,000-foot view on how COVID-19 has impacted our labor markets. This is at the national level. But we essentially see this kind of trend line at the state level and in Hennepin County too. The black line is compared to, all the other lines in the background being recessions since 1970, with the red line being the Great Recession of 2008, 2009, and 2010, if you remember that situation. So essentially what we see here is that COVID-19, as we are all well aware, but you can definitely see the data backing this up, is unprecedented. And I get sick of using that word, and my mom has told me never to use that word again. She hears it all the time. But it really is. It's very eye-opening seeing just how COVID-19 has impacted employment in the state of Minnesota and in the United States. So for instance, if I was to give you some quick statistics here, the US lost 22.2 million jobs over the course of March and April of last year. The state of Minnesota lost over 416,000 jobs during that same period of time. So 2 months, we lost 416,000 jobs. So if you put that into context, for instance, during the Great Recession, if we go to the next slide, Liz, you'll see that little blip there during 2009, 2010. It wasn't a blip at the time, but we lost about 160,000 jobs during the Great Recession. Between the end of the Great Recession and the beginning of of 2020, we gained about 360,000 jobs in Minnesota. So kind of putting this all into context, we lost more jobs in 2 months due to COVID-19 than we did in 10 years of employment expansion or during the entirety of the Great Recession. So it really does put, again, into context just how severe and widespread COVID-19's impact has been. If we're kind of looking at labor force statistics then, this next slide, this is showing how this has impacted Minnesota, and the next slide shows Hennepin County too, labor force within the area. And so here you can see unemployment rates, you can see the labor force size, how many people are both employed and unemployed. For the state of Minnesota, for instance, if I'm looking at the numbers here, and I was a history major, I can't remember all this stuff, so you see me looking down, I'm looking at my notes. But the unemployment rate in Minnesota as of February, 4.3%. This represented about 130,000 unemployed Minnesotans actively looking for work. And you actually might think that unemployment rate, looking at this data, is a little bit lower than you might expect, with COVID-19 still impacting our society, our labor markets, our economy. There are measurements of unemployment above that U3 official unemployment rate. So I'll just kind of tease you on that. It goes to the U6 level, which is an inclusion of discouraged workers, marginally attached workers, and part-time underemployed workers. And when you add all those measurements into the unemployment rate, it's actually around 10% still in the state of Minnesota. You can also break these unemployment rates down, of course, and as well as employment, when we're looking at the overall trends, you can break this data down by demographics. And this is kind of getting to that point as well. You've probably heard about this before, but also looking at the disproportionate impacts. You can break it down by different demographics. So whether that's race, ethnicity, gender, educational attainment, veteran status, disability status, you can really see how COVID-19 has impacted different populations within the state of Minnesota. So for instance, The 12-month moving average for unemployment rate as of February in Minnesota is still at 6.2%. For those reporting as Black or African American, the unemployment rate, if I'm looking at my notes here, it's around 10%. And so you can break this down by race, by ethnicity, so on and so forth, like I was saying before. And this is where it's kind of getting to what are the opportunities then for all Minnesotans across the state and across Hennepin County. So if we go to the next slide, this is where we're looking at that same type of information. One of the cool things about labor market information, and definitely reach out if you want this as an employer or as a job seeker or somebody just curious within the community. This is where you can break this information down not only by demographics and industry sectors, but you can also break it down by geography. So we can get down to Hennepin County, we can see what makes the county unique, what industries are growing, which ones have the job opportunities, what kind of jobs are they, what type of educational attainment are we looking for, or are employers looking for, what are the wages like? And then you can get down to the city level too, Minneapolis or surrounding communities. So in Hennepin County though, 4.1% unemployment rate, that represented about 28,000 unemployed persons. That is down from 10.3% at the height of COVID-19 recession, which represented about 73,000 unemployed persons. But it's still quite a bit higher than what we saw, and this is what we saw for Minnesota too, for unemployment before COVID-19 hit. So in Hennepin County, it was skirting in the mid twos, so like 2.6, 2.7% unemployment. One of the things that I lastly wanted to point about labor force stats here, seeing that unemployment, it's still high for many populations in the state. It's still high when you're looking at all the measurements of unemployment. One of the other things that actually changes how we measure unemployment is when we're looking at the black and the red lines here. That's the labor force size and the employment size across the county and the state of Minnesota. And one of the things that we've seen during COVID-19 is that the labor force size and the employment size across the state and across the county, they've significantly been reduced. So across the state, for instance, about 100,000 people have left the labor force over the past year. And we're seeing that in Hennepin County too, just people leaving the labor force. And why might that be? Well, of course, there's still concerns over health and safety with COVID-19. Job seekers might be waiting to go back to jobs that they had before. They might be waiting to transition into new jobs. There could also be concerns with childcare, finding childcare opportunities, especially with schools previously being closed to in-school kind of classroom settings. School, of course, and then transportation. So there's a lot of other factors beyond employment that, of course, have impacts on how people are working, if they're looking to get back into the labor force. But for the time being, we are still seeing those labor force sizes significantly reduced over the year. If we go to the next slide, this is where we're starting to look into, well, actually in a couple of slides here. One of the last things I'll mention about this, I don't want to get too into the weeds here, but we can also look at unemployment insurance statistics. And the one thing I'll say about this is that it's different from the unemployment rate. And I'll just give one example. Let's say that somebody was working 2 jobs and they were laid off or lost employment in one of their jobs. With that, they could sign up for and receive UI benefits, but they wouldn't be reported in the unemployment rate, however, because they're still working in that other job. The same could be if they're reduced hours. You can sign up for and receive UI, but because they're still working, they're not in that unemployment rate measurement. So this is kind of going to the point of there's a lot of things beyond the labor force, the official unemployment rate that a lot of people don't realize. And that's where you can reach out to me if you want to learn more about that. But from this slide, we're still seeing a significantly high number of people signing up for and receiving UI benefits. Drastically down from what we saw a year previous, but still significantly higher than we saw a year ago. And when we go to that next slide here, a little hard to see, but I'll summarize what we're seeing kind of here is that just like the unemployment rate, just like when we're looking at industry trends, the share of workers reporting as populations of color or as women, those with disabilities, those with less educational attainment, and how it's been impacted in industry employment, we're seeing that with people signing up for and receiving UI too. So for example, if we're looking at those with less than a high school diploma or a high school diploma or equivalent, we could see the share that they make up in the labor force, and then we can see the share that they make up for UI applications. So if I'm looking at high school diploma or equivalent, I'm going to look at my screen here. We see that they made up about 1/5, 19.9% of Minnesota's total labor force. But those with a high school diploma or equivalent make up about 1/3, 31.9% of total UI applications. So that's just an example of where we see the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on different populations within the state. And then if we look at, for instance, the Black or African American population, we see that that population makes up about 6% of Minnesota's total labor force, but makes up about 11% of the total UI applications. And then the far right column is showing that those that report as Black or African American, still reporting a significantly high number, still receiving UI benefits after March 5th, which kind of lends itself to maybe more permanent job losses, just a more challenging time of navigating COVID-19, the current situation, and looking for new work. So that's where, highlighting these challenges hopefully can reveal some of the opportunities going forward. The last few, the next 4 slides are basically looking at how different industries have been impacted in the state of Minnesota, and we can look at Hennepin County too. So if I was to summarize these slides, the first one there and some of these next charts are basically showing, for instance, that accommodation and food services, arts, entertainment, and recreation, and other services have been by far the most impacted major industry sectors. So if you start to think about those occupations that are in those industries, you'll start to see that these are occupations that typically have lower pay, lower educational attainment requirements. And it's interesting when you're looking at how can we then get these folks that have been in these industries that are still impacted by COVID-19 back into the labor market. So this is looking at reskilling, retooling. This is kind of, I'm stealing thunder from later, but one of the things that our department, the Department of Employment and Economic Development, is looking at are these roundtables around things like childcare, transportation, innovation in the labor market, which lends itself to reskilling and retooling. So we actually have some tools through our website, through our labor market information website, where you can look at, let's say I've had a job in waiter or waitressing, cashier, customer service representative, just a type of occupation that's been in one of these hard-hit industries. We can put that occupation into the tool, and then it reveals a list of other occupations based off those skill sets they had in that other occupation that you could potentially go for. So this is just one of the ways that our data is trying to help out with this new way of looking at innovation, reskilling, and retooling in the labor market. If we go to the next slide, you can kind of go through these pretty quick, Liz, but it's basically showing, and reach out to me if you want this type of information, but looking at how COVID-19 has trended differently for industries, in this case, like accommodation and food services, the orange line being the current recession compared to the blue and the gray lines being the Great Recession of 2008, and then the recession in 2001. This is looking at retail trade. And then if you look at the next one, this is looking at healthcare. So healthcare definitely impacted, for instance, with restrictions causing a cancellation of, for instance, elective surgeries, things like that. And then if we go to the next slide, manufacturing, and then finally construction. And I just highlighted these two because these are industries that actually haven't been impacted as hard as they were during the Great Recession, with the housing bubble, of course. And these are industries actually, as we get out of the winter months here in the state of Minnesota, these are industries where employers are looking for workers again. So it kind of highlights again, looking at what are the opportunities going forward for workers in the state of Minnesota, in Hennepin County. Where are the opportunities? What are the wages like? What is the training? What are the training pathways and educational pathways like? So this is all that kind of data lending itself to those conversations. If we go to the next 2 slides, basically some of the titles here got a little clipped, but this is looking at Hennepin County for what are those major industry sectors that saw the most job losses over the year between the second quarters of 2019 and 20, basically mirroring what we saw in the state of Minnesota with accommodation and food services, other services, arts, entertainment, and recreation, healthcare and social assistance, and retail trade being the hardest hit. And we can actually go more into those in-depth industries then too. Reach out to me if you like those. And then we can also, with this slide, see those industries that are rebounding, starting to gain jobs. And this is only through Q3 of 2020. but through some other resources and hopefully new data being revealed. We'll actually have a data release tomorrow for the month of March, so get excited. But we can see that a lot of industries are starting to rebound, starting to gain jobs back. There's my timer. But one of the things that we're actually starting to hear from employers then is that there's workforce shortages, trying to connect those job seekers with the work opportunities out there. And if we look at the last few slides of my presentation, it's kind of the silver lining, the optimism. I always try to end on an optimistic note. And this is showing that even as of Q2, there's over 110,000, Q2 of 2020, there's over 110,000 job openings in the state of Minnesota. If we go to the next slide, zooming in on Hennepin County, we can see that there's over 48,000 current job openings in Hennepin County. The black font here looking at those industry sectors with the most openings, and then on the right with the blue font, looking at those occupational groups. And we can actually dig into those specific occupations then too. So this is where, yes, there's a lot of openings. What are those openings? That's the conversations going forward. What are the wages like? How can we connect those job seekers with employers when we are hearing from employers again that they're finding it difficult finding those workers? And of course, there's going to be a lot of challenges that present itself when you have these conversations, like what I was saying before with transportation, childcare, education, and still warranted concerns over health and safety with COVID-19. The next slide then, I think this is kind of the conclusion. A couple of conclusion slides here. We do have an occupations in demand tool where you can look at what are those occupations in demand, what are the wages, what are the educational institutions that offer programming to go for those occupations. And then if we go to the next two slides, we have over 20 labor market information tools through our labor market information office. So check us out, reach out to me. The final slide, the final two slides, I keep saying final and I keep lying to you, I apologize. This slide is showing some examples for those employers that are listening in here today. We have an occupational employment statistics tool that looks at wages for over 800 specific occupations. So you can kind of see how are other employers setting their wages for different occupations. And job seekers can use this too to kind of set their expectations for, if I go for this occupation, what might be expected to earn. And then we have a cost of living calculator as well. And then this is the final slide, I promise. We have a lot of resources through careerforcemn.com. Check it out. This is for both job seekers and employers. There's hiring events, there's career fairs that both employers and job seekers can check out. And then we also have a lot of resources that I didn't name, workforce strategy consultants, business development managers, employer engagement specialists. You can look up programming and financial assistance through our department. So I would encourage you all, whether you're a job seeker, an employer, or somebody just curious about the labor market, definitely reach out to myself. I'll have my contact information on these slides. And it's great doing this collaborative work with Interfaith Outreach. I appreciate the time given. We'll continue to work together to highlight these concerns, highlight the trends that are happening in Minnesota and the West Metro, Hennepin County, and then highlighting those opportunities, I think, is the most exciting part of it. So thank you.
Thank you, Tim, for that overview of the current labor market and how we might engage with deed services. And just a quick note to the audience as well, if you have any questions, we'll have time at the end for Q&A, but you can also feel free to put them in the chat as we go along. And we'll now hear from Natalie from Interfaith's Employment Services team.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you, Tim. I've had the pleasure of getting to hear you a couple of times, and I always learn something new. I really appreciate the attention you've drawn to the exacerbated impacts of the pandemic on people of color and women, as 64% of our interfaith clients identify as people of color. More than half are women, and many are or were low-wage earners. Also really appreciate the ideas that you're sharing for reskilling, thinking differently about hiring, and just creating a more diverse and inclusive workforce. We're really grateful for your partnership and your expertise. So as Anne said, my name is Natalie Bullinger, and I'm privileged to be the Employment Services Manager here at Interfaith. Let you in on a little secret. I joked with a colleague earlier that today is the first day I've even considered wearing a blazer in well over a year in this COVID world we're living in. So just a little. side note there. But my part in our talk today is threefold. Some of what I'm going to share kind of mirrors and reflects what Tim talked about. I want to share our understanding from our local perspective of job seeker challenges as a result of the pandemic, and also just before, when we did some research with clients and heard from them to help revise our programs. Also want to provide a brief overview of those updated and revised programs that we offer and services. And lastly, I want to invite you to partner with us in some very specific ways. I'd be remiss not to acknowledge the three awesome employment services team members that are also on this call, our two employment counselors, Ann Kohler, who you've seen and heard from, Colin Owens, and our AmeriCorps member, Joe Ramlett. We have a really great team. So if I'm honest, I am feeling a little worn down today, saddened by another lost life, effects on our community. There's just a lot for all of us to hold right now. And even though I'm feeling that way, I'm also feeling really grateful to be here with all of you. I see familiar faces. I see people I know Anne has connected with recently, and I'm just so grateful you've taken the time to be here. Our goal today is to grow partnerships and continue to build pathways that prevent hunger through good jobs right here in our community. Employment that not only provides a wage to afford food, but also continues to build pathways to prevent hunger. So before we jump into our learnings from job seekers and stakeholders, we want to take a minute to hear from all of you, our audience of local business owners, hiring managers, volunteers. I see lots of people out there. We want to know, we know, I should say, that through listening, we really better begin to understand the challenges from all vantage points, and we create better solutions. So from your perspective, we want to know, how has the pandemic impacted hiring or finding candidates? And feel free to just throw your responses in the chat. And I think Colin's going to shout any out that are in there.
Yep.
I think more virtual events.
Difficulty finding positions, accessing types of positions, less applicants applying to positions,
Yeah.
team members that had childcare needs.
And couldn't continue. Yeah. Thank you for jumping in and sharing those. I think they mimic, and on our next slide, you'll see we're going to flip to the other side of the equation, the job seeker challenges. The gray boxes that Liz will populate here in a moment are what we've seen and heard from job seekers in the last year, the challenges since the pandemic began. So not surprisingly, job seekers have been burdened with the stressors and challenges of managing distance learning, lack of childcare. Tim and a couple of our audience members mentioned that, as well as the general COVID health concerns, lack of access to internet or a home computer, access we're proud to newly be able to provide. Disparities in generational wealth impacting reliable vehicles. Many of our clients rely on public transportation, which is always a challenge in the suburbs, and even more so since COVID, more limited bus routes and lines to what was already limited. Perhaps more remarkable or new information are the learnings from the research our team wrapped up just before the pandemic hit. And that's what you'll see in these colorful boxes that Liz populates on the screen now. So our goal in doing research was to learn from job seekers and stakeholders in order to revise our services to better meet the needs of our community. So we asked job seekers to tell us about their experiences finding living wage jobs, and then we listened. And what emerged were the themes you see here about what was difficult, such as not having connections to high growth or high wage opportunities, lacking the right degree or credential. This was reported by US-born citizens as well as immigrant job seekers with limited formal education, and those that had advanced degrees that just aren't recognized here in the US. And it creates challenges in finding jobs in demand that are a fit for skill sets. And lastly, what I want to mention, we heard over and over again the decreased self-esteem due to being rejected, feeling hopeless. Those were really difficult things to hear from people. So after aggregating all the themes, we asked ourselves questions like, how might we expand networking opportunities or create accessible on-ramps for living wage jobs and build client capacity for what is, for all of us, emotionally taxing, a job search? And I invite you all to ask yourselves these same questions. How can we all be a part of this solution? On the next slide, what I'm about to share is where we landed in our work in revising programs. You'll see across the top of the screen are 4 pathways for job seekers to access our services. Our goal with all of them is to support job seekers in building marketable skills, growing their networks, and obtaining jobs that meet financial needs. You'll notice we explicitly name employers on this slide, as we believe these programs are points of connection. More on that in a minute. And Liz, if you'll populate, I'm going to tell a little bit about each program and that point of connection that we see. So for Employment Express Services, this is our program for job seekers who want to build their computer skills, just drop in and get a resume, redo, coaching on interviewing. We think this could be a point of connection if your employees need to increase their computer skills. Could they benefit from that and come here to do so, or virtually do so like we're doing today? And how might we coach your local employees to stay retained and grow within your company? We can help provide that coaching or resume updating and thinking about what's the right next step. Employment Coaching Advantage is our next program, and this is for job seekers with experience and a robust skill set who are either unemployed or underemployed. And so we wonder, do you have hard to fill openings, and how might we connect our qualified candidates to you from either of these 2 programs? Third one is Employment Training Options, and that's for job seekers who want to increase their skills and earnings through short-term trainings. Do you have hard to fill jobs that require a specific training or credential that takes a year or less? Well, we don't provide that training. We do partner with local agencies that do, and we wonder how we can co-create pathways from the training to your company. And our last program is kind of Employment Training Options Part 2. It's a pilot program for job seekers who have additional barriers to employment, like language barriers, or haven't been in the workforce for a period of time and are wanting to build those entry-level skills right here in an internal training placement at Interfaith in our resale store or our food shelf. And so those folks will be gaining skills in stocking and customer service, and we wonder how might we create bridges to permanent and stable employment for those that participate in this program. So I'll wrap up. Go to my last slide, right, Tim? We are not a high volume placement agency, but we are uniquely positioned to support the holistic needs of our job seekers through addressing barriers to employment. For example, we can help individuals and families stabilize during crises, also support with childcare, transportation, all those barriers that can get in the way, and we can be a bridge. Those barriers get in the way, and it really it's like Kevin said earlier on, people are worrying about basic needs rather than being able to focus on job search. And that's where we can come in and then make those connections after people have those basic needs resolved. So one of our agency's core values states that community partnerships provide powerful and life-changing opportunities, and we know this to be true. We see it with our volunteer, our training, our employer partners over and over. We cannot do this work without you. We're a bridge in this community, connecting eager and qualified job seekers to your local opportunities. Together, we can impact racial and gender and income disparities through accessible pathways to living wage jobs. So I will wrap up with an invitation. We want you to join us in building the network for our local job seekers so that everyone has access to the great job opportunities that exist right here in our community. If you're a community member or connector, natural connector, and you know people who know people, we want to know those people. So reach out to us and make introductions or consider volunteering with us and sharing your skills and expertise. We have a really robust group of volunteers and couldn't do our work without them. And lastly, if you're a business owner or hiring manager, please partner with us. We want to share your opportunities and find and create new pathways to living wage careers. So leave your name in the chat and we'll contact you, or reach out to us directly. Our information will be on one of the upcoming slides. And with that, I'll pass it back over to Anne to begin our final segment, the question and answer.
Great. Thank you, Natalie. We'll now open it up to audience for any questions. You can type those into the chat and we'll answer as many as possible. And then we'll follow up on any we may not be able to get to at this time. So please feel free to enter those there. And I think we had one earlier just asking Tim to maybe share, if you could share the links to the occupations in demand tool, and we could either share that in the chat now or we can send it out at a later time.
Yep, I just put it in.
Oh, perfect. All right. Oh, yep, we can definitely pull up that contact slide so that people can copy that information down. You can pull that up at the end here.
And I saw a question about childcare, or a comment really about childcare getting in the way for some folks. Could you or others speak to how Interfaith helps overcome that barrier with families?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question and comment. Yeah, childcare, I think particularly during this time of distance learning has become an increased challenge, and Interfaith can help in a couple different ways through our Caring for Kids program, which is designated for kids 5 and under. That's helping find direct childcare or daycare options. And so we can connect to that program. And then we also have a Great Expectations program, which is focusing on children in kind of the school-aged range, and can connect to different programs either within the schools or external tutoring programs, different things like that. So we can certainly connect you in different ways to some childcare enrichment options.
Looks like we had a question about looking for volunteers. Any specific areas need more?
Yeah, and I wonder, Colin, if you would like to comment on that.
Sure. We are currently doing a lot of volunteer work on job search assistance and motivational interviewing. In the next few months, we're hoping to get more development on volunteer engagement and different roles that one can play in this process. Overall, we have a lot of great volunteer opportunities in various areas of our organization, which Liz is our volunteer coordinator, part of the volunteer coordinator team. So if there's opportunities, please feel free to leave information, or you can see a lot of our opportunities through Volunteer Hub. Yeah, Liz, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, if you're interested, we'd love to chat and really have that individual conversation. What are your passions, your unique skills and abilities, and really want to leverage those to support the work that we're doing.
And I know we're getting close to 12:45. If you have any other questions, please, again, still feel free. We'll be here for a few more minutes to answer any questions in the chat. If you have to hop off, we understand that as well. And I'm wondering, Liz, if it looks like you're already doing it, sharing that screen. So again, there's our contact information. Feel free to reach out to any of us or as well to Tim as well. And again, thank you all so much for joining us today. We'll be here for a few more minutes to answer any lingering questions. Otherwise, enjoy your day and feel free to reach out at any time.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm seeing some comments from some local employers, and we're capturing all of those from the chat. For those that want to connect with us, we will be in touch. So thank you.
Hi, this is Heidi Highland, and I just want to share with you guys too that if they're, in this pandemic time, we all need healing, and nature heals. And I think when we're feeling down or unsure of ourselves, horticultural therapy I bring to various populations, and it just is so successful. So certainly, it's self-serving that I need employees, but I think this type of a job just helps so many. So I look forward to understanding how we, can work together potentially. So thank you for providing this today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And it seems like folks don't have any lingering questions. So I think I will close us out. Thank you all so much for your time this afternoon. Good one.
Bye.
Thank you.